Hello and welcome back to Anna Rose Reads the podcast. I am your host, Anna, and today is a really big episode in the history of Anna Rose Reads. I have a guest that I have been wanting to talk to for what feels like forever. Whenever I read their book, Just Like Home, it's got to be like 3 years ago now, which is completely insane that much time has passed. Last summer, their book Spread Me came out with Tor Nightfire. And this year, with Tor Books, we have Make Me Better by Sarah Gailey. That's right, the Sarah Gailey joins me to talk about their book, Make Me Better. We talk all about high control groups and writing in isolated settings and our current social moment. It's a really, really good conversation, and I am so incredibly thankful and thrilled to be sharing all of this with you. So I will catch up with all of you after, but enjoy the show. Hello, Sarah Gailey. Thank you so much for coming on to Anna Rose Reads. I am thrilled to have you. How are you?
I'm doing okay, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Oh, no, it's literally a pleasure to have you on. I've been reading your books for some time. I was a very, very big fan of Just Like Home when I read it a few years ago. And then last summer was the summer of Spread Me, which was just the most fun that I'd say that me and my friends have had in horror in a while. And now we're here to talk about your next release, Make Me Better, which is coming out on shelves next week, correct? Is that
Yes.
is time correct for me?
Yeah. As we're recording, it comes out just what, 5 days from now.
Yeah, on May 12th from Tor Books. So that's super exciting. How are you feeling leading up to this release?
Oh, so excited. I've been working on this book for 6 years.
Yeah.
It's been a huge lift and a huge commitment, and now it's finally going to be out in the world. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's I mean, I have the e-copy of it, but I checked on Goodreads, to see like the length, and I saw it was like 400 something pages. I was kind of shocked that it was as big as it is, because I don't have the physical size to look at it. So it feels like a big book, both in the literal and the metaphorical sense. So I was curious how long this story has kind of been sitting with you, and like how it compares to your other books and all that good stuff. But before we get too deep into that, do you want to just like briefly introduce yourself for my listeners if they're not as familiar with you as I am?
Sure. I'm Sarah Gailey. I'm an author of speculative fiction. Lately, I've been kind of Lately, I've been summarizing the things that I write as I write upsetting fiction.
I like
I
that a
write
lot.
across genres, I write across lengths and forms. I write novels, novellas, comics, short stories, science fiction, fantasy, and horror. But the one thing that runs through all of them is that no one's going to have a good time.
You say that, but Spread Me was a good bad time, as I like to say. It was a really, really good bad time. No, that's really funny. I like the way that you describe that. That's a good identifier across all genres and lengths of your work. But Make Me Better is a book that it's big and it poses a lot of questions in my mind. It is one of those like heavy sociological books and like makes you think about human connection, who you are to your fellow person. And it's really kind of confounding in that way. And I think it makes me really reflect on our current social state, like kind of post-COVID and all this kind of stuff. But do you want to go ahead and briefly synopsize? I never want to give anything away. So if you want to synopsize the book, you can, and then just kind of speak about where this book started for you, the nexus of the idea for it.
Sure. Yeah. So Make Me Better is about a high control group, an isolated community of people who live on a remote island in the middle of a saltwater lake. And it's really the story of this community and how the people in it define each other, define themselves to each other, and try everything in their power to be good to each other and love each other, following the rules that they've decided to abide by.
Hmm.
Um, this book was, as I said, a huge lift. It's the most heavily researched book I've ever written. And so much of it was inspired by some things that I watched happen in communities I was part of and adjacent to.
Hmm.
In 2019 and 2020, I witnessed a huge amount of community upheaval. And the pattern I saw was that a lot of that upheaval stemmed from people deviating from the roles they'd been assigned within their community groups. That this is kind of a thing that people do everywhere, and it's not necessarily malicious or even bad to do, but we tend to assign people in our communities very specific, particular roles, like the good one, the mess, the mom.
Yeah.
Um, these roles get assigned usually unconsciously. Sometimes they get named in ways that seem to be facetious, but maybe kind of aren't. And the problem with this is that people are complex, layered, nuanced critters. And we have a hard time sticking to our assigned roles, especially when big things happen in our lives
Hmm.
that fundamentally change either how we're able to function or what our needs are or how we define ourselves to ourselves. Now, a healthy community can handle those kinds of changes. A healthy, functioning, supportive, stable community will say, oh gosh, you've gone through, for example, a tremendous trauma and it's changing how you approach the world. And that's allowed because you're a person and people change. Unfortunately, high control groups are not healthy, stable, supportive, caring communities. And they have a tendency to quite severely punish people who transgress outside of their assigned roles within the community. Now, when I was writing Make Me Better, when I first started thinking about it, I did not have high control communities in mind at all.
Interesting. That's so interesting. Okay.
I was looking at the communities around me, which were not high control, which
Yeah.
were in many places dysfunctional along standard axes of dysfunction, right? Like people bringing unexamined assumptions, beliefs, histories, anxieties, and traumas into friction with one another
Hmm.
in ways that can just naturally cause irritation, points of pain. But I watched a lot of these communities collapse in that friction. And I thought, this is something that I want to write about. So I began researching community dynamics
Hmm.
and the ways that people bring their trauma into contact with each other that can cause that struggle and friction. And as I started doing that research, I realized more and more that narratively, the way to discuss that dynamic in an interesting way would be to confine it, right?
Yeah.
Because when these communities I was adjacent to collapsed, those people didn't all die all at once in a big explosion, right? They
Yeah.
just went to other communities, they went to
Yeah.
other
They
friendships,
disperse.
and
Yeah.
they left the group chat and probably went to a different group chat to talk shit about it. And that is, again, a more healthy way of being in the world, but I don't write about healthy ways of being in the world. So I decided that I wanted to geographically isolate this community and also ideologically isolate this community.
Hmm.
And that led into, as I mentioned, one of the most intense periods of research of my career and probably of my life, um, learning about the structures and dynamics of high control groups, authoritarian communities, what people colloquially in the world call cults.
Cults. Yeah.
Although in my research, one of the things I learned that is like my biggest challenge in talking about this book is to not use the word cult wherever
Yeah.
possible
Yeah.
because it is a stigmatizing word. And your listeners may be going, well, what's wrong with stigmatizing a cult, which is hurting people? And the reality is that a cult is not an entity of its own. It's made up of individuals who usually elect to participate in it. And when those individuals are kind of getting ready to leave or are starting to think about leaving, using words like cult to describe the environment they're in can prevent them from being able to make that decision
Hmm.
because we have this societal narrative that people who are in cults are in some way deficient, um, are intellectually deficient or socially deficient. And the reality is that any one of us is susceptible completely to high control group recruitment tactics people get involved in these situations for a lot of complex reasons that are not different from the reasons that you and I do things. And so, we try to use more understanding language
Yeah.
to talk about it. However, it's a huge pain in my butt because not a lot of people know about that. And so they'll go, "What's your book about?" And I'll say a high control group, and they'll go, "A what?"
Yeah.
And then I just sound insufferable.
No, no, a part of me I agree with the phrasing that you're using about high control group because a lot of it, I have like a special interest and I do have my master's in forensic psych. So a lot of this is like, on par with the academic side of me that I know this is true. But I know like also to the layperson, like you just said, people aren't gonna get what that is. And I think the problem is, the big cults that people refer to, like Jim Jones with the purple Kool, we say, oh, you're drinking the Kool-Aid all the time. Like there's so many colloquialisms that we've made from this and it's become such shorthand. But when you really sit down and look at it, it's really, really fucking complex.
Yeah,
And like you said, there's no one type of person that falls into this. Uh, it's just somebody who's vulnerable at a certain time, like in the period of trauma or loss or, just like whatever people go through different things and people are different people within their same lifetime. So it's a capitalization upon that vulnerability, I feel like, is the way that I've always kind of looked at that quote unquote cultish behavior, but it is high control group is, very much the more eloquent and apt term for what's going on here. But I do want to ask you, like when I was reading your author's note or your acknowledgments, whatever it was at the end of the book, you had referenced some of the stuff that you had read and researched. And was that the bulk of this research that you talked about that took up most of your time? Or like, was there some other research that you did? Or was it mostly just kind of like the social dynamics, the psychology, that kind of thing that you were looking into?
Oh, I did a ton of research that I don't talk about at all in the endnotes of the book. Um, the stuff that I'm discussing in my acknowledgments, and don't
Yeah.
worry, listeners, this isn't a spoiler or anything,
Yeah.
is about the research I did that helped me develop the high control community
Hmm.
in Make Me Better. And that research was about attachment systems and social dynamics within authoritarian groups, which is like oh, and also the linguistics of
Yeah.
religion and manipulation,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is very interesting reading and research. And, when I was doing that research, I actually didn't um, go in depth on any one particular high control community.
Hmm.
I didn't dive deep into like Jim Jones
Yeah.
or Children of God. Like I didn't want to base this group in the book on one particular narrative because, again, those narratives are familiar to us
Hmm.
from documentaries and tabloid articles and colloquial references and jokes that people make. And it makes it way too easy to escape the very real appeal to be
Hmm.
like, well, obviously, I wouldn't go do that.
Yeah.
Um, so I built this community in the book from first principles from the ground up. And it was only later I was looking into I think I was looking into Falun just to because I was talking to a friend about Shen Yun and I wanted to make sure that I actually knew what I was talking about. And I realized they were in upstate New York, and that led down like a little Wikipedia hole that led me to the Oneida community. Which if your listeners are thinking that sounds like the plates, yes, you're correct. This is the dishware people. But they were founded as one of the earliest free love communities and are
Interesting.
often referred to when we talk about the history of high control groups. And I read about their rules of conduct and their like structure, and it's almost identical to the thing that I created for this book. It made me go like, I got it. Um,
That's so
but
interesting.
no, the other research was really, really fun.
Yeah.
Um, the high control group research was fascinating and I think fundamentally changed me as a person and
Hmm.
changed how I move through the world. And the other research was like play.
Yeah.
Um, one big chunk of research was on the Lake Pinier mine collapse.
Yeah.
There's a lake in, I believe, Louisiana, called Lake Pinier that used to be a 10 water deep freshwater lake. And beneath this lake were salt domes, which are, big dome-shaped deposits of salt underground. And mining companies go and take that salt and mine it out of the ground, often for industrial use, but sometimes for, culinary use. But I think primarily industrial use.
Hmm.
And when they do that, the way they keep those domes from collapsing is by carving the salt out to leave big columns. And
Yeah.
those big columns of very dense salt support the weight of the lake bed overhead. Now, when you have these salt domes, they're frequently adjacent to oil deposits. So, oil mining interests or oil drilling interests were looking around nearby to see if there was oil anywhere around. And due to a miscalculation or a misapplication of a calculation, it's not totally clear which, the drill that was drilling down under the lake bed to look for oil drilled through the lake bed and into the salt domes. I don't know if you've ever seen what happens when water comes into contact with salt, Anna. It's not great for the salt. Um, so when the drill went through the lake bed, water started flooding into the salt dome and dissolved those pillars of salt that were holding up the roof. The result
Hmm.
was that the lake bed collapsed, causing a massive whirlpool, waterfalls hundreds of feet tall. The entirety of the freshwater lake drained into the salt caves underneath the lake. The velocity of the moving water was so intense that it reversed the flow of the outflow of the lake into a nearby bay, pulling seawater into the
Crazy.
lake. Miraculously, no one died. Um,
I'm
Several boats
looking,
got
yeah,
sucked down into the caves that then bobbed up like a day later.
I'm looking at it right now because this sounds like so familiar, and it's west of me. It's in New Iberia, like near New Iberia, so this is all very familiar. And I'm
Yeah,
like, this
yeah,
sounds, but that does sound right. If that would happen
yeah.
anywhere, it would
You
happen
could
in Louisiana.
you could probably drive there, and now you've got a
Yeah.
saltwater lake.
Yep. It's crazy.
Um,
The way that that exists physically is so mind-boggling to me that that can exist in that way. And then one, I mean, it's not, I say one mishap, it's a big mishap. Don't get me wrong, drilling like
it's a
that is
pretty big
very,
oopsie.
yeah, but still the fallout of that, this huge, and it's a huge ecosystem change. It's all these different things. And I'm sure that you're going to go on to say that that was what your research was about, but it's so crazy how something like that just flips it, you know?
Yeah. Well, absolutely wild and wild to consider, you know, the drill that this exploratory drilling rig was using was large, but not as large as the hole that there ended up being, right? It's like
Yeah.
a small intrusion introduced two elements that had been totally separate for I'm I'm gonna say thousands of years because
Yeah.
those salt deposits take quite some time to build up and introduce them to each other, and the result was a total transformation of each.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a disaster, but it's also really cool.
Yeah. Well,
So
nature's just wicked. It's just like it's the awe of
yeah,
it. I think that for me kind of, and especially when I was reading your book, that this part of Make Me Better about the ecological part of what this place is and what it has to offer. Um, yeah, you just think about how in on basically the flip of a dime, it can all change and it's not like we're talking about like a small fishing pond. We are talking about a sizable lake. We're talking about so many gallons of water. Yeah, that's so fascinating. I'm tempted to now go take a field trip. That we've talked about this. I'll send pictures. But no, that's so incredible. And it is a really interesting place to set this story. And I'm really glad that you had kind of physically siphoned off these folks in this community to kind of, there's a real clear difference between what they call, like the mainlanders, which is everybody else and them. Um, and I'm a little curious, and we can cut this if it's a bit of a spoiler, but as far as the time is setting, it seems like pretty now. It seems kind of nowish because you talk about like the penny being removed from circulation, which is something that just happened. But if you've been drafting this book for a while and you like predicted that the penny would be out, okay.
Yeah, I don't normally write books for this long. I'm not
Yeah.
normally taking so much time to
Hmm.
get a book from first draft to on the shelves. Typically, it's like within a couple years. And when I was first drafting this, there are some details that stayed in it that were designed to make it feel just in the near future,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like we've got the entire for your listeners, the entire book does not fully take place on the island, although most of it does. There are also interstitials that show us some things that are happening in other parts of the country. And I've got like a guy reflecting on his childhood throwing rocks at security drones. And at the time that I wrote that, it was a little signal to the reader like this takes place like 10 minutes into the future.
Yeah.
The penny being removed from circulation is part of it. And I was listen, I don't care about the penny, right? I'm not like attached to the penny as a concept. I
Hmm.
was so pissed when they announced that they were going to take the penny out of circulation because I was like, that was like the one thing I still had in this book that people hadn't done to each other yet.
It was a signpost, yeah. I think you might just be able to tell the future, Sarah. I don't know.
I gotta tell you, that's not the first time I've been accused of that based on things I've written in my books and stories, and it's never good future stuff happening. It's never like, oh, yay, and then everyone had a nice day all at once. It's always the like, oh, did you know when you were writing this short story about major agriculture businesses partnering with the US military to monitor farmers to make sure they weren't using non-copyrighted seeds? Did you know? And I'm like, no, I was making that shit up to try and be upsetting.
It's
Why, why are we here now?
it's only funny because if you don't laugh about it, you'll cry. But
Uh-huh.
we're gonna have to get you to write a very, very happy book and let that be spoken into existence. But I do want to steer this chat back to your book because there's a really big part of this book, and it's simply the title, Make Me Better, that I want to talk about. And I kind of want to talk about how you landed on it, and all that good stuff. But for the most part, a big part of this book is trying to unpack what it means to be good or to become better. And like in order to understand what better is, you have to understand where you are now. And it's such an interesting concept to think about before we even like really get into the plot. Make me better. It's a plea, right? A little bit of like, please help me be better. So you're hearing from somebody who is in a place that they don't want to be. They want to be somewhere else. They want to be better. But what does that look like? And as we see in this book, it takes different shapes and forms, emotionally, physically, all these different things. But I just wanted to give you the space to kind of talk about the title because I just feel like it does a whole lot of work for this book. You know what I mean?
I'm so glad to hear that. This title really reflects the, I think, as you said, the plea that is in the hearts of so many people.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things that is foundational to human ego survival, to our ability to maintain a sense of self, is the need to think of ourselves as pretty much good most of the time.
Hmm.
Like a lot of us can integrate the knowledge that we do bad things or that we've done bad things or that we're not always our best selves, right? Sometimes someone's calling me and I recognize their name on my phone screen and I go, ugh, and I dismiss the call even though I could hang up. That's not necessarily my best self acting in community, right?
Mhm.
I can integrate the knowledge that I do that sometimes into my understanding of myself, but for the most part, it's important to me to think that I'm pretty much good most of the time. And that knowledge for a lot of us who are operating with, let's say, a moderately accurate understanding of who we are in the world, needs to align with our actions.
Mhm.
It's extremely dissonant and can be damaging to one's ability to survive in the world if one has to think of oneself as pretty much good while doing a lot of things that one knows are pretty much bad.
Mhm.
This can lead to um, a psychological phenomenon often known as splitting.
Mhm.
This is the answer to the question, like, how did Nazi officers do the things they did in the camps and then go home and sit with their families and have a nice dinner? And it's because in that situation, people will develop a me who does those things and a me who is the real me, right? The person who's doing those bad things to people at my job isn't the real me. That's that other person. That's also why it can be very important, uh, not in a positive way, but like in a load-bearing way, to have uniforms associated with work that hurts people. Because you put on that uniform, you become the self that does the bad things. You take the uniform off and you're the real you again.
Mhm.
And this is not something that I'm assigning to people. This is a well observed and documented psychological phenomenon. Um, so if we don't want that to happen to us, right, our actions need to be in alignment with what we think is good to do, and
Mhm.
maybe is what a good person would do as much of the time as possible. So what are those actions? That's a really hard question to answer. And it's an especially hard question to answer as the world turns into this vice that is narrowing and narrowing. A lot of us are feeling squeezed, right?
Mhm.
How do I be the good person I want to be when I can't afford groceries? If I believe, this is a hypothetical me because I don't actually believe this, but if I believe that a good person doesn't steal food,
Yeah.
but I can't afford food, what do I do? Do I starve or do I accept that I might have to not be a good person? Um, if I believe that a good person protects their neighbors and my neighbors are getting kidnapped off the streets by members of an American gendarmerie, but also I'm the only one at home with my kids, what do I do? Do I go out and try to defend my neighbors? Do I stay home and try to protect my children? A lot of us are faced with a lot of really impossible questions like that. How do I be, even if not the best version of myself, how do I be a decent version of myself? How do I be a good version of myself? And then if I don't feel that I'm being that decent version, how do I be better?
Mhm.
If good feels out of reach and bad feels like where I am now, the way I get from one to the other is to try to get better.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of organizations and groups out there that see that question in our hearts and say, that sounds profitable to me.
Yeah.
I will tell you how to be better by taking the right supplements. I will tell you how to be better by working out at the right gym. I'll tell you how to be better by uh, getting involved in your local community to sell video phones to your friends. I'll tell you how to be better by following all the rules that I am giving to you, that I'm telling you were given to me by someone who you will never be able to see or talk to yourself. But don't worry, I asked them, and they said this is how you stop being a bad, broken person who feels bad feelings because you're bad and broken. And that promise is irresistible. I mean, who among us wouldn't be thrilled if we thought there was a guarantee of the right answers?
Yeah.
And especially those of us who deal with physical struggles, as Celia, one of the main characters of this book, does.
Mm.
She struggles with fertility, and there are few things as vulnerable as that struggle. And it is very easy to imagine a predatory community seeing that struggle and saying, we can heal you.
Hmm.
And that promise being one of the most tempting ones of all.
Yeah, and as you're talking about all this, this is all very much in line with my understanding of these like high control group, the perfect attempt to capitalize on something like that. And it really, unfortunately, the way that our society is either evolving or devolving, depending on how you want to look at it. With social media, it's never been easier to feel worse about yourself in whatever context. So like, all I can think about is like I was from an empathetic approach when you think about Celia and her fertility. She's struggled with it for a long time. She feels like everybody has left her in her life. She doesn't really have a lot of friends. She doesn't really have family. And then, like, all you can imagine is if this is a world that has the same social media that we do, and you hop on and you see a million pregnancy announcements a day, then, like, that is another driver to push, like, it's never, I feel like our society is so constructed to never feel worse. Like, we've never been able to feel worse. You know what I mean? Like, it's just been, it's super easy. And, like, some of it rightfully so. Yes, there are really bad things happening and we need to be aware of them and we need to, be active about them and do something about them. Other times it feels a little needless and just like, rubbing not to be punny, but rubbing salt in the wound with this. So it's so interesting that, you kind of did this deep dive on this right now in this moment. And I know that you said that you've been, working on this book for a really long time. And so it kind of answered my question about why this book, why now? But, it feels very, very prescient to write about this. I'm, curious if it feels that way for you sitting on the author side of this.
It's hard to feel that way from the inside, I think, because I've been so in it. But the more I talk to people about it, the more I can see people really resonating with the thing I most wanted people to resonate with this book, frankly, which is an understanding of how none of us is outside the sphere of vulnerability.
Mhm.
Um, None of us is in a position to say that would never happen to me. And a lot of people do say that and think that. A lot of people are inclined, understandably, to say, I would never do that from a place of needing that to be true, needing to believe that they're safe. It comes from the exact same instinct that drove people. This happened to me more in my 20s than it happens now, but to talk to me about like how to dress when I went out at night, right? It's this
Yeah.
idea, if I just know enough and I'm smart enough and I'm savvy enough, I can protect myself. Those things only happen to people who aren't prepared.
Hmm.
Um, but as I talk to people about Make Me Better, I always approach that conversation from this perspective of things are really hard and things that make it less hard to be alive are appealing. And every room I've been in so far, as soon as I say anything along the
Hmm.
lines of it's really hard to figure out how to be a good person, someone in the room starts crying.
Yeah.
Like that wound is in all of us right now. Um, and I think people would have responded differently 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not 10, maybe like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
I think people would have gone, it's not that hard. Just just be kind. Just be thoughtful.
Hmm.
I give to Amnesty International. Um, I think, as you mentioned, social media makes it really tough right now to stay in any way grounded.
Yeah.
But it also, I think, has brought a lot of people's attention to how impossible it is for us on an individual level
Yeah.
to fix the things that are so broken about the world.
Yeah, I mean that's it's the help part about it, right? It's the catch 22 of it all of it. It is so helpful, one, to not feel so alone in how hard it is whenever people are being willing to admit, yeah, this is really fucking hard right now. But at the same time, there are these things that do feel like they're taking advantage of that hardness and, kind of leeching off of that this vulnerability, this place of wanting to get better and things like that. And I want to talk a little bit about, about the community that's on this island, a little bit about their workings and, their a little bit of their psychology, I guess, because I'm mostly a horror reader, and I know that this is a little bit more of a sci-fi-ish, it crosses some genres, real contemporary, realism, all this kind of stuff. Because all this could happen theoretically, for the most part, with like maybe one exception. So the thing about this book that really got my emotions high was it wasn't some of the big actions between the characters. There was a few scenes of very small, and I know this is an overused term, and I'm okay if you want to use a different term for it, but gaslighting when somebody you have it in the text and you do this thing which I think it's funny in hindsight, but a character says so and so and then calls a character by a different name, and the character's like, what, why did you call me that? And they're like, no, I didn't call you that. And then me, the reader, I go back up to that line and I'm like, I'm double checking too. Like that action had me cracking up a few times because I'm like, wow, I'm really into this. So I just kind of wanted to give you the space to talk about, using those things in this writing with these high control groups, you know, and maybe how that felt for you to write it. Because I was kind of cracking up that I was like, oh, I just went back and reread that because I too was concerned.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I fully agree with you that the term gaslighting it's overused. It's been really flattened by
Yeah.
a lot of a lot of people. That said, clinically, gaslighting is a really legitimate
Yeah.
term that describes a very specific course of interactions, right? And um, this is like particularly important to me and close to my heart because I
Yes.
have been in a couple of long-term situations that involved a high density of gaslighting. It is an intentional behavior that is specifically designed to make the other person, the target, doubt their ability to trust their perceptions. Um, because I have a very uh, withered, shriveled little heart, my partner and I will occasionally joke about this dynamic, which is a very serious dynamic to be taken very seriously.
Oh,
But
we do the same thing too.
yeah, if you can't joke about the bad shit that's happened to you, what's the point of it?
Hmm.
And the like turn of phrase that I'll use in this joke is I'll say, "Babe, you sound crazy right now. Are you feeling okay?" That's like because that is the approach, right?
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. You don't sound like yourself. And this comes from a classic film in which one character is trying to make another character think that she is losing her mind and does so by turning the gas lamps in the house down incrementally over time. So it gets darker and darker in the house, but insisting that they're still at full
Hmm.
brightness. So this is the dynamic. And I hope it's obvious I'm explaining this for your listeners.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
in case they don't know, I can tell you now. Um,
No, no. I love for the clarification on what legitimate gaslighting and where like the clinical term came from compared to the, oh my God, he just gaslighted me like for 3 hours, like that.
yeah,
I'm all for it, so please continue.
yeah. Now, in the situations I've been in where this is coming into play, right? Um, an example of this that I've I'm fine. I've recovered from this. Don't worry, I'm very comfortable sharing it. Is a partner who was having an affair for a long period of time and would bring up my post-traumatic stress disorder when I would say something like, hey, it seems like there's a dynamic between you and this person. And my partner would say something along the lines of like, I know that you've got like this PTSD that can make you, maybe read too much into things. And, oh, are you sure you're remembering that interaction that I had with that person, right? Because, you've got your memory disorder and so maybe you're misremembering. That was designed to make me doubt my own perception. And it worked. That's why people gaslight people because it works.
Yeah.
Over time, if you feel that you can't trust yourself, you can't trust your perceptions, you'll start reaching for things that you can trust. And if you're sufficiently isolated, then the thing you're going to be reaching for is the person who's trying to control you. You're going to say, "Oh my gosh, babe, you're right. I can't trust my memory. Do you remember what happened? Will you describe it for me so I can check my own recollections? That's how this functions. That's how this works. It's a way to clear space in someone else's perception of the world so you can install what you want them to perceive.
Yeah, it's like
So
an
this is,
override, pretty much.
yes, absolutely. You shake the Etch-a-Sketch a little bit and then you get to
Yeah.
draw your own picture. And this is a very classic part of high control group dynamics. It's also, and I don't want to give anything away, um, but one of the techniques that the group in Make Me Better uses to, uh, I don't want to say punish because they don't say that in the book, but to correct the behavior of community
Yeah.
members is based on a, a CIA interrogation tactic of this same variety that's designed to clear out what's in someone's mind, to get rid of their ability to feel that they're on stable ground with their understanding and perception so you can install your own. And maybe the perception you're trying to clear out is you're not supposed to tell us those secrets. No, actually, you are supposed to tell us, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe it's your friends and family love you. If you can destabilize that perception, then you can install your friends and family don't love you and you should cut ties with them because they're toxic and they're hurting you. Um, the gaslighting in Make Me Better is quite pervasive, but the very obvious examples
Yeah.
also made me laugh to write. I had a great time. It was very fun writing these characters who are like, I'm just gonna go in there and push some buttons and see what happens. Oh, what's happening is it's working well. Great. Bring on more buttons.
Yeah, no, that very much is how it read. And with every example that they kind of I say get away with it, but like that moment passes, you feel like a little defeated that, because like, this is the great thing about reading. It's a text in front of you. You can go back and reference, like I just said. So you have the undeniable proof in front of you, unlike these poor characters who do not. So it was really just like interesting psychologically for me to sit with that as I was reading, like about what was going on with me, the characters, and my response to it. It was really, really interesting. Yeah, but the other thing too about this particular high control group is that, and you brought up a little bit about like attachment styles and dysfunctional attachments and all this kind of stuff, and that's really what this group kind of preys upon, in the sense that there's no real ownership of anything on this island. Everything is supposed to belong to everybody. There's really not supposed to be, like you said, like any punishment, so to speak. There's no quote unquote wrong, but there are a lot of social cues that would indicate that something is quote unquote wrong. Um, and there's a really big denial too of, and I don't know if we want to say what it is or what it isn't, and I can cut this if we need to, but there's a big denial of death. They say that, and or losing, like losing a physical item or losing a person. They say, nothing is ever lost. And we come to find out more about all these things later on, but it's part of their big overall philosophy. And to a point, I can understand where that's appealing, because it would be great to never have to grieve, to maybe, rewire your brain to not have to hurt, to maybe understand that things are, oh, well, I'll come back to them later, at a different time. That'd be really, really great. And that would hurt a lot less. But there's also a fine line where it disservices our own humanity and how we treat one another. And I was very curious for you how it felt to write that dynamic and kind of examine that line of where maybe this is helpful in some ways and grossly hurtful and neglectful in others. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I don't think this is a spoiler at all, and
Yeah.
I'm talking about it a lot in
Okay.
my my promo for the book, so I think we're on safe ground here.
Perfect.
Yeah, that was really interesting to write about. As you mentioned, one of the promises that they make at Kindred Cove that is one of the lures, is one of the most appealing things about it, is the promise that nothing is ever lost and that you don't have to experience grief ever again. Grief and shame, I think, are two of the most universal, inescapable emotions in the human experience. And they're also two of the least tolerable emotions in the human experience. Um, shame is a brutal emotion, and it's one that people will go to great lengths to avoid. And grief is, to me, the least tolerable emotional experience I've ever had.
Hmm.
And when I was working on a later draft of this book, my editor and I had been circling that something was missing. We were like, something's just not, there's a depth that's needed here and what's missing in it. And we spent hours trying to figure this out. And then I experienced a massive personal life upheaval,
Hmm.
and it was really painful. It was a really difficult, brutal, life-changing experience. And I was grieving for a couple of months. And that grief was physical. It was a physical sensation. And I felt that I could not bear it.
Hmm.
Um, and I have been in, can you tell, therapy for a really long time. And a lot of the most constructive work I've done in therapy is learning to tolerate unpleasant emotions, right? A
Yeah.
lot of people haven't built that muscle.
Hmm.
Um, I started that practice when my, at the time, brand new therapist, I just moved and I just started working with her. And she said, okay, so I had told her about all the hard work I'd done on myself.
Hmm.
And she was like, okay, so what we're going to do is sit here and you're going to tell me about something that happened to you like this morning, just a normal thing. And then you're going to describe it as pleasant or unpleasant. And I was like, well, this is baby food. This is the easiest. What's her problem? And like 4 minutes later, I'm sitting there sobbing because something unpleasant had happened to me. And being able to just name that, just name that was unpleasant, was
Hmm.
like so hard.
Yeah.
Um, so I've spent like years and years and years working on this practice that's become like a very active life practice of being able to tolerate and witness and understand my emotions without them overwhelming me or being unbearable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and with post-traumatic stress disorder, that's a really important practice because my body doesn't process adrenaline correctly. And so if something startles me or a firework goes off outside my window, I'm going to have a feeling that is in my body and it's a big feeling, but I want to be able to witness and ride that out and feel it without having to act because of it.
Yeah.
Grief absolutely stretched the limits of my ability to tolerate a feeling
Hmm.
to almost a breaking point.
Hmm.
It was so overwhelming and so awful. And I could like barely touch it. It was like a hot stove.
Hmm.
Um, in Make Me Better, the people who are at Kindred Co. live by a system of values that insist that grief is not necessary.
Hmm.
It's not that people don't feel grief. It's that it's not necessary because nothing is ever lost, right? And we grieve when things are lost. That's the promise there,
Yeah.
is that you don't have to feel that feeling. And writing that was what unlocked this book.
Hmm.
I was in that season of grief and I ended up talking to my editor and being like, I figured it out. This is what's missing from the book. It's not just that they're like, hey, everything's good.
Yeah.
It's that they're like, you don't ever have to experience that.
Hmm.
And if you've ever experienced grief, you'd do almost anything to never have to feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. I relate so much to all of what you shared and what you're saying because so like my mom has MS And, like that's one of those autoimmune conditions that they don't come with just one. Sometimes there's more than one, and they don't reveal themselves until later on. And so we've had a lot of wondering if, it's lupus, if it's the, like all this, whatever. But the bottom line is that, she ended up doing a lot of work on herself, and I mean, she's like, it's totally manageable and in remission now, but there was also fear for me because, apple don't fall from that tree about what my life would be like whenever I was a young adult when I was in college. And, I had kind of had gone through like my first like real bad breakup. I was really like in a weird place with my parents and everything. And the biggest thing, and that was like when I started my therapy, journey. Um, and the biggest thing, was the reactivity, right? Like you said, is like the automatic, bodily response to feel immensely and intensely every time that something happens. And that's really hard when you have a body that is intrinsically linked to your emotions, as most human bodies are, because then it manifests physically and you get sick and you are not able to go and do and participate like you normally can. So for me, like understanding that reactivity and that emotionality was really, really important. And some days I'm great with it and other days not so much, right? But, on the really intense moments of trauma and grief, like whenever we've lost family members, whenever we've gone through really hard times, it is it has been paramount to me, that experience of learning a little bit that one, that it happens, recognizing that it happens, and two, a little bit of how to deal with it. But to be offered basically on a silver platter, as the community at Kindred Cove does, is, oh, you can opt out of this. It's real. I don't. I think everybody would be a little they would. How could you not want that? How could you not want to opt out of pain? You know. So I think that aspect of this high control group made it extremely relatable for anybody to want to stay and be there and be part of this community. Despite all of the strangeness, the kind of weirdish rules, like what you're leaving behind on the mainland, and all of that. That one aspect about nothing is ever lost is so much work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's funny because in writing some of the sort of recruitment language around
Yeah.
that, Easy is this
Hmm.
character who is one of my favorite characters I've ever written, very charismatic, very intense,
Yes.
and does a lot of the work of kind of drawing you into the ideals of this community. And in writing one of those exchanges, I had Easy say something and I stopped and I realized, like, oh, I actually believe this to be true. And there are several things, in the ideals of this cult that I think are at least grounded in realities. Otherwise, I think it would be shitty writing if I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, look at these guys. Aren't they tempting? They think that your feet should be on backwards. Like, you
Right,
know,
right, right.
I'm not saying anything scandalous here. But one thing that really has, like, I haven't been able to let go of is Easy describes someone as not trying to avoid pain and not trying to avoid loss, but trying to avoid grief.
Hmm.
And I've started looking at some of the more inexplicable behaviors in people I know and love
Yeah.
and seeing some of that in there. Someone who loves their spouse so, so much, but pulls away from them in moments of intimacy.
Hmm.
um, People who refuse to change jobs even though they hate their job and they have a good opportunity. And I think there's an instinctive shying away from grief there.
Hmm.
Someone who I admire very much and think is very smart once told me that grief is part of any process of change,
Hmm.
even positive change, because when we say yes to one thing, we say no to something else.
Yeah.
And saying no to something else carries grief with it. If we accept that grief as an inevitable part of life and the human experience and growth, it's so much less scary.
Yeah.
Um, but if we can't accept that, then it's really frightening to change to the extent that, I know people who I care about very much who like won't give up the hat that they've been wearing for the
Hmm.
last 10 years, not because the hat has attachment for them, but because, well, what if I can't find a hat as that I like the way that I liked this hat when I got it? And it's like when I look at that through this lens, I just see people trying so hard to avoid that pain of grief because they think they won't be able to survive it or they won't be able to survive it unchanged.
Yeah. Grief is a little bit like a spectrum in that way about, like some of the whenever you're gaining, you're still losing a little bit, like you said with opportunities and stuff with that. And it's a really interesting way to kind of frame your mind around especially the things that are really upsetting to you. Like I one of the biggest things in this book that was really we're talking about it in the big terms, like with this denial of grief and denial of death, but on a much smaller scale, the things that kind of drive me batshit insane, like between like friends and family, is whenever people aren't being realistic, whenever they're in denial about a situation or somebody else, or and they're just not being realistic. It's something that always like really kind of drives me crazy. And I think, if you can find it, if I can find it in myself and other people can find it in themselves to reframe of, oh, that person just doesn't want to hurt so much, then we'd probably be living in a lot more of a kinder place. But yeah, denial's such a rough one, man. I don't know what it is for me, but that it's something else that you touch upon in this book is just that denial of feeling, even though there were certain characters who were deeply experiencing a certain feeling at a time. Like Celia was very much experiencing certain emotions, and Easy's thing to her was, "Are you really?" Like it was the questioning until they could move Celia into something else that they preferred her to be experiencing in that moment, which was really, really interesting to sit with. And so I was very curious how that felt for you to write. That's just such ripe emotional territory to write in.
Yeah, that was again so much fun to write. I really love that you have this ability to perceive the emotional underpinning of the scene, that it's not just this dialogue. It is very much easy saying it's easier for me to tolerate you experiencing this
Yeah.
emotion instead of that emotion. So we're going to get you over there. Um, and that again is an interaction that I see frequently. It can be hard for us to tolerate each other's challenging emotions. And, let's say that I'm feeling insecure about this book and I'm talking to a friend and I'm saying, oh, I feel unsure about are people going to like it? What do I do if they don't like it? What if, my book events go badly? I have friends who are very dear to me and who know me very well, who can sit with me and go, that is a scary thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really scary idea. Do we want to like sit in that thought? Do we want to come up with solutions? Right? What's the question? But there are also people who are inclined to go, up, 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 up. We're not going to put those negative thoughts into the world. No, it's going to go great. And what they need is to see me go, yes, it's going to be good, so that they know that we are both in the same place. We're regulated. We are co-creating a positive vibe together. That's what they can tolerate. These interactions between various people at the Cove, because this is a big cast,
Mhm.
and I got to write a lot of them interacting in different ways, was really fun because I was able to bring in that kind of dynamic through different people with different intentions. Some of them really believe that the way you care for someone is to change their emotional state to a more positive one.
Mhm.
Some of them believe the way you victimize someone is to deny their current emotional state and use that to feel powerful. And some of them, like Easy, recognize that you can use a shift in someone's emotional state to attach them to you and to
Mhm.
make them look to you for guidance.
That's it. You mentioned a good point about this book is that it is a big cast. I mean, we've only really touched on Celia and Easy. We haven't even, gotten to the larger cast of characters and kind of why Celia and Easy are in this tumultuous. I shouldn't say tumultuous. It is a little bit, but it's revealed to be tumultuous for certain reasons. But it's such an interesting balancing act that you have to carry for the whole community. And I was also very curious how you did that, like with the plan a little bit more logistically, like on the planning process of like kind of carrying all these characters and their personalities and their intentions, because it's a big book and it's saying a lot with each character's story. And, we're not spending all of our time with Celia and Easy. I mean, that's mostly who we're with, but there's plenty more people who do a lot of the same things that we've been discussing for the last hour or so.
Oh my God, it was so hard.
Yeah.
It was so hard. Why did I do this to myself?
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times over the last 6 years I have asked myself, why did I do this?
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of people here, and all of them are in very tight-knit community with each other.
Hmm.
So I have a master spreadsheet
I was wondering
with,
if there was
with
some kind of organizational document.
yeah, I have a master spreadsheet with the timelines of all their lives, and it's broken out year by year and tracks each year how their relationships to each other evolve so that
Interesting.
I can try to keep track. And you know what? When I first made that spreadsheet, it was great. It was exactly what I needed.
Mhm.
And then I had to change the age of one character
Oh.
during one specific event.
Hmm.
I had had them experiencing this event as an adult, and then I was like, no, 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 that needed to happen when they were a kid.
Hmm.
And the chaos this created, spreadsheet in shambles. I was pulling my hair out. It took me like 3 hours to fix all these timelines. And that happened probably 10 times over the course of writing this book.
I
It
need
was
a
a
sticker.
nightmare.
I need a sticker that says spreadsheet in shambles to because that's a huge indicator of my emotional state. Nine times
Yeah,
out of ten.
yeah.
That's it's really I really do like to hear that technical side of stuff from writers though, because it is always interesting how you kind of keep that stuff together and how it translates narratively into the page, especially with a book like this where you mentioned, like we kind of get these interstitial chapters where it's different times and places and things like that. So I would imagine kind of the bobbing and weaving that you had to do on your end in and out of the narrative was also a little bit of a larger requirement, that needed a spreadsheet. So I totally get it. Um, there's one last like really big topic that I want to hit on, and then we can start wrapping up because I know we've been talking for an hour. But Make Me Better is a really, really big book, and I kind of wanted to ask how you feel about it in light of all of your other books and all of your other work, but also, Make Me Better is a book that spends a lot of time kind of talking about pregnancy and reproduction and the responsibility of creation and all these things in addition to wellness and being good or better and all of those things. And I think it's a really interesting pairing, especially the way that our society is and how it kind of views pregnancy and all these things. So I wanted to give you the space to talk about that and that decision to do that in this book.
I so appreciate that. And that's something that I've been turning over in my mind how to talk about.
Hmm.
You know, when you're an author, there's kind of a responsibility that you have to protect things that you're not okay talking to people about or that you're not prepared to be vulnerable about.
Hmm.
Um, and so whenever I'm getting ready to promote a book, I kind of do an inventory of
Yeah.
like what am I willing to bring out there? And I tend to be quite private with my personal life, to the point that every now and then people in my family will be surprised by things they learn about me in interviews.
Yeah.
Um, and this is something that I have decided I'm comfortable talking about, but you'll forgive me if I'm maybe a little vague about the
Yeah,
details
absolutely.
and specifics. You know, when I started to write Make Me Better,
Hmm.
I was in a place in my life where I was in a relationship that I had entered into with the expectation that we would have children together.
Hmm.
And circumstances of that relationship changed in a way that caused me to accept very painfully uh, that that wouldn't end up happening.
Hmm.
And it was extremely difficult. You know, when I talk to people in my life about this, I'm like, yeah, I fully accepted it and came to terms with it, and then was just kind of sad for several years, all the time. And in writing Make Me Better, I did a lot of exploration of what it feels like to sort of be faced with that acceptance.
Hmm.
Um, Celia is a character who struggles with fertility and who has spent a lot of time and money and energy trying to have a baby and not being able to. And through her, I got to ask questions like, why is this important to me? Which is also a question that, someone else close in my life ended up asking me. Why, why do I want this so much? Is this like a physiological imperative? Is it because I'm looking to fill some gap somewhere? And I gave her all of the scariest answers to
Yeah.
that question, not the answers that are inside my own heart, but the answers that I sort of looked at while I was examining this question of like, why is this so painful?
Hmm.
In hindsight, I can see that I was asking myself, why is this so painful? So vehemently because I wanted to solve that pain,
Yeah.
right? Just like these characters in this book, I thought if I could solve the pain, it would go away.
Hmm.
And in trying to examine it enough to be able to solve it, I got to ask a lot of really scary questions. Like
Yeah.
at one point, I was asking myself, am I a bad person for feeling sad about this? Is so and so in my life who said this very cruel thing to me about what I would be like as a parent, are they right? And what does it mean if they're right and I want it anyway? What does that say about me? I got to really spend a lot of time with these questions. And so I got to explore a lot of that in the book. And I also got to explore a little bit of how it feels to want to have children and to be told by people around you who you trust, oh, but there's other ways to have family. And how that lands. And I'm exploring
Hmm.
that question with the reader.
Yeah.
That's a question that an attention that I'm inviting the reader into of, is that a compassionate answer? Is that a good answer? I don't have a yes or a no to that because it's so complicated a subject to approach. But frankly, my books aren't here to give yes or no answers. They're here to say, isn't this question awful to sit with?
Yeah, no kidding.
Um, I also, as always, am looking at a lot of themes of bodily autonomy and make me better
Yeah.
because Celia is not the only character who's concerned with pregnancy.
Hmm.
Kindred Cove has an annual tradition of their salt festival, and at the end, they send a young woman out into the world on a kind of sexual rumspringa with the goal of getting pregnant. Go out there, get pregnant, come back with a baby in you. And I have one character who's very, very beloved to me, Jessie, who
Yes.
is young. She's a teenager, and all her life, all she's wanted is to go get pregnant and have a baby because that's what you do to do a good job, to be good, to do your purpose to your community. You go and you do that.
Yeah.
And I got to ask some questions through her about what it means to be a young person and have a narrative set out for you of what you're supposed to do and to be impatient to get to it,
Yeah.
impatient to do a good job. I remember very vividly being 16 and being like, I can't wait to go do a good job
Yeah. Yeah.
living the kind of life I'm supposed to live,
Hmm.
which is a narrative and a thought pattern that exposes young people to immense vulnerability at the hands of predators.
Yeah.
Um, Getting to explore those themes in this book, it's wild. And I'm so sorry to your listeners because we have described like 28,000 themes that are in this book. And I'm sure that they're thinking it must be like as dense as, a power bar. But
No,
um,
no.
I really got to just put so much in here and so much of myself and so many of the questions that I was asking. And one of the really surreal parts of having this book come out now is, that relationship that I was in where expectations changed around getting to have kids. I've been writing this book for so goddamn long. That relationship ended. I went through a whole process of transformation and recovery. I found a version of myself that would not have been in that situation. that version of myself entered a new relationship, I met someone and fell in love with them and got married to them. And we're talking about trying to have kids. And I'm coming to that question now, having gone through this entire doorstop of a novel's worth
Yeah.
of rotating the idea of family in my mind.
Yeah,
Like such a wild, like folding of space and time. And those seams are touching now.
that is incredibly wild. And it's so, I think that, you were saying, sorry to your listeners for the
Yeah.
themes in this. No, 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 no. Because I think for me, and like in hearing what you've shared, which one, by the way, thank you for being so vulnerable and candid about all of this. This is why we read and we share our art, is to have conversations like this. But it reminds me that we are we contain multitudes. We can be so many different people. And I feel like this book explores that option in a few different ways. Some for the better, some for the worst, and the realization of all that's out there versus maybe, all that's not. But we can be so many different people, and there's so much to life and humanity in particular, and our connection with one another that allows this growth and change to happen. Particularly with Celia's journey, as she, gets to Kinder Code, where we meet her versus where she ends up is very, very interesting to look at. And then you do a great job of this book of spelling out who everybody else on this island is, who is in connection with who they are now, but you give backstory. And everybody contains multitudes. It's not, like you said, it's not black and white. It's very gray. There's a million shades of gray. But I am really thrilled for you that this book is coming out when it is, and I it sounds like it's been a labor of love, and I know it probably has not been easy to carry and write for this long, but I'm really, really thrilled for you that this book is yours, and that it's in your catalog, and that it's going to be on shelves in less than a week, and all those things, because it felt like a very big book to me when I was reading it. I think that comes through in your writing, how much this means to you.
Well, it means so much to me. And I'm incredibly honored to get to share this book with the world. And, you know, I'm sure that some people will resonate with it and some people won't. Um, but really just getting to have a life where I got to write this book
Yeah.
and be changed by the writing of it. I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
very different person because of the process of making this book. And that by itself is a privilege beyond measure.
Yeah, it really sounds like this is a vital book in so many ways. Like it's so, it's just, it feels, I just giving the word just feels so big because it touches on so many different things, but it's so true. Oh man, well, I'm thrilled for you. I'm thrilled for the book to come out. And I do want to kind of start wrapping this conversation up. I don't want to
Yeah.
take up your whole entire evening. But what else do you have going on in 2026 that we can promote and plug for you? You mentioned a book tour, so what's going on with all that? What else can we shine a light on for you?
Can you tell me when this episode will be releasing?
I think not next, either the end of next week or the beginning of the following, one of those two.
Okay,
So
so it would be like the 16th or the 19th?
yes, yes, yes.
Okay, in that case, I am not going to plug my book tour because it'll be over.
Okay. Very
Um,
fair.
I've, boy, I've got a whole lot going on this
Okay.
coming year. A lot of it, unfortunately, hasn't been announced yet, but I will be at Bay Area Book Fest and the Locus Awards, which I'm co-hosting with Maggie Takuda
Nice.
Hall at the end of May. That's in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm going to be appearing at QCon in Southern California. It's a queer comic book con, and it's going to be so much fun. And I'll be at Rose City Comic Con this September.
Nice.
That's in Portland, the 11th to 13th. I have a ton of other stuff on my calendar, but unfortunately, a lot of, festivals and cons and stuff ask you not to announce before they do.
Yep.
So I will just ask your viewers to keep an eye on my social media. You can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, Tumblr. I think I have a Facebook fan page, but I don't manage it. So
Okay.
Your mileage may vary on that.
Yeah.
And I also have a newsletter called Stone Soup that your listeners can subscribe to get updates about where I'll be and what books I have coming out. Um, and I really hope that they will keep an eye on my social media toward the end of this month because I have got a very exciting announcement that I can't say a thing about now. So I'm just
Okay.
telling them,
Okay.
please come look because I'm really amped.
This is so fair. Yeah. No, I normally link everybody's stuff, like their social media pages, their websites, all that good stuff in the show notes. That way, if people want to go and find it, they'll be able to. So I'll definitely make sure that we include that. That's really
Thank you.
exciting, and I'm very curious what this announcement is. So you've got my interest peaked as well. So I'll be staying tuned for sure. I have one quick question. I do have a Patreon, and one of my perks of having a Patreon is I allow my folks to send in some author questions. And I have a friend who very much loves the River of Teeth stories. And he wanted to know what your favorite aspect about writing those are. He says that they're crazy fun, and he's been trying to get me to read them for quite some time. I unfortunately haven't made my way to them, but that is our Patreon question of the week.
All right. And what's your friend's name?
We call him Z.
Z, thank
Yep.
you so much for asking this question. I very much love the River of Teeth books. They were so fun to write. And my favorite part of writing them is the language.
Yeah.
They, similar to my novella Upright Women Wanted, they're in the pulp Western genre. And I get to have so much fun with sort of a heightened sense of language. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to keep it grounded even a little bit. My toes are barely touching soil when I'm writing this. And that was how I felt about River of Teeth and Taste of Marrow. That's how I felt about Upright Women Wanted. Um, it's just so much, it's just so fun.
Yeah, I really want to make my way to those because I really I love whenever you can tell that an author is having fun with something, especially whenever an author has multiple works out and you can kind of, see where the fun is.
Yeah.
Like for instance, Spread Me was one that I felt like you were having a lot of fun. I
Oh
don't
my
mean
gosh, I had so much fun.
Yeah, I don't mean to be presumptuous with that, but I was having a blast. So I felt like, you had to be having a blast as well. But thank you very much for answering that question. And just genuinely, thank you so much for your time and speaking so candidly about this book. As I keep saying, I know it's a big one and it's one that you've carried for a very, very long time, but I really appreciate you making the time to speak as candidly as you are about it. Like I really firmly believe that art like this is what moves the needle, and this is just my hope in doing this podcast, is connecting with folks in a way that we can continue these conversations beyond the page. So immense gratitude on my end. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a real pleasure. You're a very gifted interviewer,
Oh, thank
and I
you.
just I really appreciate you reaching out.
I'm just a cage and I just know how to talk to people sometimes, I think. We talk to everybody at the gas station when we go, so that's always my go-to answer for that, but thank you so much. Another huge and heartfelt thank you to Sarah Gailey for coming on the show. Again, this was like dream guest check. You can check that box down. This was just like getting Sarah on the show was so, so cool for me as a reader and a fan of their work. And then just to have such a deep conversation about this book make me better really was everything. You can tell, like, I don't even know the words to describe how freaking cool this has been for me. But truly huge thanks to Sarah for just the presence that they brought to the conversation, the vulnerability, willing to dive deep into this book and all that good stuff. It really it's what I wanted to do when I made this podcast and I had the chance to talk to authors and artists and creators about their work. So, mission accomplished, man. I feel like we're doing it and that feels really good. Thank you all so much for listening and tuning in every week that you do, and for interacting with me on social media. The Patreon is going very strong. We had our first writer workshop kind of event this past Monday with Brian McCauley, which was a really, really good time. I I really hope that we get to do another one of those soon. And if you're interested in joining us, you can check out the link in the show notes, or on my website or on any of my social media pages. If you want to come join the Patreon, it should be everywhere at this point. So come hang out, come join, come get in on the fun. Again, thank you all so much for listening. And until I chat with you all next, I will see y'all